everybody. Hello, welcome to our August meeting. It's another Zoom meeting, and I feel like I should be saying something like we shouldn't be meeting this way, but hopefully, that will be changing in the next month or two, depending on what our dear president says. And we with COVID numbers, we hope that with the more people getting vaccinations and feeling the hope on the horizon since they've opened up to 35 plus and soon we'll be opening to 18 plus, that we will be able to be meeting in person soon. I don't know about you guys, but just having this monthly meeting and watching as everyone came onto the Zoom, it just made my heart so happy, which is a really lovely thing. I'm not going to say too much. I just want to say that this month is August, which is Women's Day in South Africa. And if you'll read our newsletter, I hope you guys are reading our newsletter, you'll see we have some really interesting articles about how Women's Month came to be and the strength of South African women. Um, and so we want to celebrate the fact that women are people that create change. Women create change for their families, for their children, for the good of society. And I know as a mother myself, it's important that I make this world a better place for my children. Many of you feel that way as well. Um, and so, yeah, being here with IWC just reminds me, seeing all these incredible women, of how much we do. Like the women in our club do incredible things, and I'm so proud of all you guys. I know maybe that sounds a bit silly, but if you look for this month, I was saying Lydia has joined us, and she's highlighted in our newsletter as the member of the month, and just learning about everyone's lives. I hope you read that section because um, we have strong, amazing, incredible women who sail the world, women who work in nonprofits, women who are artists, women who are doing all sorts of things. And obviously, we'll be hearing from a very special woman this month, Cathy Marston, which Victoria will be introducing. And she's been a woman in a man's world and has changed it for the better. So I'm very much looking forward to what she's going to say. Also celebrating South African women. Obviously, we've got a medal. Yay! Is it Tatiana Schoenmaker? So we're really proud of her. And she's the first woman to win a medal for the South Africans at the Olympics in over 20 years. So it's definitely to be celebrated. So, like I said, I want to keep this short, but I just wanted to welcome everyone again and tell you how glad I am to be here. Before I go, there's something very important I need to talk to you about because we are coming up already into looking for 2022. So we need to start thinking about nominations for our 2022 board. And I don't know if any of you have thought about volunteering on the board or if you know someone who you think would be a good fit for the board. But I can certainly say it's been a very special and empowering, and I often talk about connection, but it's really been a chance to get to know my other colleagues on the board because we're all working together for you as a club. We are working together to make sure that as a club we're strong and we're connected. And so please think about it. So we're going to be starting the nominations process. There'll be more information in the next month on Facebook and in our newsletter. But as you can see, Sue has joined us today. And she is our past president from 2020, and she is one of the people who will be head of the nominations committee. So if you would like to volunteer yourself, if you'd like to nominate someone to be a part of our board for IWC, please send an email to our IWC account. Victoria, can you just confirm what that is? It's going to give me the email.
I will read it just to be absolutely sure. It is IWC Cape Town Board, all one word, at gmail.com. So that's IWC Cape Town Board at gmail.com. I'll just pop it in the chat now, just so you can see it. And yeah, if you could send any nominations or if you want to volunteer yourself.
Yes, and we ask you to send it to us and to Sue, and I see that Sue is raising her hand, so you'll be able to also email her, which we'll put in the chat box, and I think she will also want to probably let you know that she's available via WhatsApp. Sue, you'd like to say something?
Yeah, I believe it's supposed to come to me first and then I contact the board. I will stand corrected, but I think that was the way it was done last year.
Well, I think we can put both in and just make sure that we're CC'd so that everything is very clear.
Well, that's what I was trying to ascertain, that last year it was not. And I feel that perhaps we should continue that way. I know the previous year as well, as if you remember the previous year I was involved, the board wasn't in on the initial one. They were not. It was straight to the previous president, and then she works out the week from the chaff and then can contact the board from there on. But
okay, I thought it would be a good idea just to make sure we can CC the board as well. But most important thing is that people know they can contact you, Sue.
Please, directly. My number, my email address is the one that's in the directory. It hasn't changed, and I will be checking it every single day.
Right. Thank you, Sue. Yeah, Sue, as I said, is joining us from the UK. So we're really glad that she'll be part of this process. Yeah, so what else do I want to say? I think that's, for me, really important because I know for myself it's been obviously a difficult year, and having such a strong board has made a difference in my life in the most wonderful of ways. And I hope that I have been able to, in my capacity and with our board together, been able to make a difference in your lives too, because that's what IWC is about. What's our tagline for our new website? It's make friends, make memories, make a difference. And when you're part of the board, you can really help that happen in the best of ways. So we really do hope to be hearing from you. We really hope that you will consider it, because I know that some of the deepest friendships that I've made in this club this year and last year have been from being on the board. So I think that's enough from me. I don't want to talk too much, and I would love that we can move on. I think it's Christine who will be speaking next. But before I go, just all of my love and thanks to you guys for our club. And really, you made my morning by seeing everyone here.
Okay, thank you very much, Amanda. And I think we owe her a big thank you. She's talking to us from the US of A at 4:30 in the morning. Such dedication and looking good, Amanda. I'm seriously impressed about that. So thank you very much for your dedication for doing that for us. And so, yes, good morning, ladies. Welcome. Lovely also to know we've got faces from overseas. Sue and I think Renata's also here, is in the UK. So it's lovely that you're still connecting and we're reaching out across the sea. So as Amanda said, our newsletter is out. I actually print it for a lady here who doesn't have access to the website, but it is on the website. And this month it's a bumper edition, as my printer will tell you. It is 36 pages of fantastic information. There is some fun stuff, there's recipes, there's a wonderful interview with Lydia, one of my Area 14 ladies. There's all sorts of inspiring articles, and it's been a lot of work putting it together. And thank you again to Amanda, who also managed to do that from America for us. So please do go and have a look at our fantastic new website and log in and have a look at the newsletter. You'll also be pleased to see there is a calendar in the newsletter, and we are dipping our toe very tentatively back into group activities. And if you have a look at the calendar, you'll see there are a few things planned for this month. It's certainly not easy for our group leaders and our area reps to actually organize something and plan ahead, because they never know if it's going to happen or not. And so thank you to them for all their dedication and for their persistence and coping with all these constant challenges and changes, because it's difficult when you want to book a venue and then you're not sure if it'll go ahead, you're not sure how many people and so on. So thank you for sticking through that with us. There'll be a Friday lunch club, hopefully this month. There's going to be the hiking and walking group, hopefully is going ahead. We've got the garden group who've got a workshop organized. The Sunday lunch club is hopefully going ahead, which sounds lovely. It's Julia's birthday this month. I just ought to mention that. Spanish conversation has been penciled in. So, you know, there's quite a bit happening, but we've also got Zoom events, as you know. We've got Zumba on Zoom. We've got a fantastic art and design presentation, which is also on Zoom. So we're doing a bit of both. but please think about joining one or two of the activities that have been put together. And fingers crossed, you know, we're really hoping that maybe next month we can actually meet at Kelvin again. Who knows? We wait to see what our president tells us. But I'm glad to see that some things are happening. And thank you again to the group leaders who are doing their best for us. So please give them your support. And I won't go on too long because we've got lots to do this morning, but I'd like to pass over now to Anna Maria, who's going to speak to us briefly about our philanthropy work this month. Over to you, Anna, if you're ready to talk.
Good morning, ladies. Due to the COVID epidemic, especially at the number 5 level, many abused women were obliged to continue living with their abusers. Through misinformation, they were led to believe that many of the shelters were closed. Things have not improved, even with the lifting of restrictions. Loss of work, illness have only increased the numbers of abused women and children who desperately need help. Berenice Bacher, director of the Sarah Bartman Home for the Abused Women and Children, explained that we will never be able to make an impact on this high rate of gender-based violence unless we start bolstering our responses to the high levels of violence, community-based assistance from community religious leaders, local schools, local law enforcement, and court structures, and a system to fight the scourge at community level. If not, we will never be able to make a difference to the survivors on the ground. All our donations go to worthy causes, but I think as mothers, grandmothers, aunts, nieces, this one is particularly dear to our hearts. And I would please ask people to give generously. Thank you. Just a reminder that a lot of people donated cash and tins for the Ladles of Love record-breaking attempt at the longest line of food cans. That is 6.7 kilometers or 90,000 cans. It is back on at 9 o'clock on the 29th of August at the V&A. So for 50 Rand extra, you can either be a volunteer to help set up the cans or walk the 6.7 walk. So your Sunday walk could be put to good use. I read this recently. To make a difference in someone's life, you don't have to be brilliant, rich, beautiful, or perfect. You just have to care about them. And I'd also like to tell you that on the 18th of August, but we'll send a notice around, at 10:30, the Hyde Hotel is very kindly giving us a cooking demonstration. It's prawn and chorizo spaghetti, I think it's tagliatelle, with a leek sauce. So I'll remind you, everybody, at 10:30 on the 18th. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, dear members. Nice to see you here. And today we are very lucky to present to you a new member. Please say welcome to Glynis Many Hart. Glynis, welcome to the IWC. Thank you for being here. So today I will be short, but I want to ask you if you have any change in your address, in your telephone numbers. Oh, in your telephone. If you have any change in your telephone numbers and your address, email, please send it to me. We are working in the addendum for the next AGM. You will get all this information. Of course, all the information about the new members from June until probably October. So enjoy the meeting, enjoy our great speaker, Cathy, and salud.
Good morning, everybody. I just want to say how overwhelmed I was when everybody came in. That was really lovely to see everybody and in such high spirits and this early in the morning. That was really, really great. I just want to touch on a couple of things. I'm just going to share my screen. I touched on it in the newsletter. Just want to go over it. Particularly during the riots, there was a lot of fake news WhatsApps were flying about, and I would just like to say that The IWC WhatsApp communication channels are not the place for fake news. And if you say, well, what's fake news and what's real, just go through these 5 steps in your head before you forward something. I always say think before you click. So just think about these points. So who wrote it? If you don't know who wrote it, definitely don't share it. If you don't know where the original WhatsApp came from. Can you verify what's being said, particularly with the audio messages? They usually don't say who they are, and so just be aware of that. Particularly if somebody says, oh, this happened to my neighbour, and then you can see it's been forwarded many times. So the chances are this didn't happen to the neighbour of the person you received it from. If the WhatsApp makes you angry or scared, chances are it's fake news. And the same with shocking video or pictures or audio. And often it can be pictures from a different country, different time. Even the BBC I saw shared the South African Defence Force convoy going in on one of the highways, and that was actually from hard lockdown last year. So even the BBC can be fooled. They just obviously put it online, and then it came down very quickly because people had pointed out that it was actually not current. And just make sure it's not a hoax. Just take a breath and think, is it likely that Woolies are going to be giving me a 50,000 Rand voucher for just logging on and putting your details in? Unlikely. Same with Longcom and Emirates. We often see these things. So just take a breath and just think, is this likely? And the best thing is Woolworths voucher hoax, Longcom hoax, WhatsApp, Emirates WhatsApp hoax. Chances are, if you put those 3 words in, it'll pop up. Sure enough, it's a hoax. So just to be aware. So just please, we wouldn't just treat it like gossip. If someone told you something and you weren't sure where it had originated from and weren't really sure that it was true, would you pass it on to somebody else? Possibly not. Just put the same thing in place with your WhatsApp. So okay, and just one other thing I just want to share with you. I just want to make sure that, as Christine said, that people are able to access the website and the newsletter. So I'll just go back to here. I just want to show you how easy it is. So you literally just open the website, iwccapetown.co.za. I have to minimize my windows. And literally in front of my button. Sorry, there we go. Right, so you can see the login button here. So you can either log in there or come to the members area and pull down and go to newsletters. So for this, we'll just log in, click on login, and you come up with this screen. So yours will not be populated if it's your first time. I shall just take that off and just put in your email address as you would normally. And then the password is the same password that it has been for the last, certainly since April 2020, which I'll just, if you just put the I, if you just click the I button there, the I icon, literally an I icon, it will show you what you're typing. This is very handy and will show you if your caps lock is on. You can see I've put my caps lock on and it says my caps lock is on. So then I take it off and go to lowercase team. So it's capital IWC, lowercase team, login. Okay. And then you come up with the members only page. And there's lots of information here, but for our purposes, all we want to do is download newsletter. There we go. So then you can, then you can just download, click the download button. Sorry, my Zoom is just in the way. Click the download, there we go, and save it onto wherever you want to save it onto your computer. And that's it. And as you can see, there's as Christine showed you, there's 36 pages. and it reads like a proper magazine, and we're very proud that it's become such a great tool for the club. So please, I've shown you how easy it is. No excuses. Go do it. Okay. Well, I'm just going to now introduce our speaker. He's very kindly offered to do a Zoom for us, which it's always lovely to have an interesting Zoom, because I know people are desperate to meet in person, but it's just great to have somebody who's quite experienced on Zoom to be able to do this. So, Cathy Marston, as befits my role as social media chair, I actually first met Cathy on Twitter, the social media application, where we bonded over the tendency of our cats to come and climb onto our keyboards while we're trying to work. So it's funny enough, her cat is currently squirreled away, shall we say, to leave her in peace today. So some of you may know Cathy from the Nose Wine Bar that used to be in Cape Town. And she was there for 7 years before she turned her attention to writing, judging, and increasingly teaching about wine. And in 2012, she started offering the internationally recognized Wine and Spirit Education Trust courses, and was the first person in Africa to actually do so. And then gradually, she changed from being a wine writer, judge, etc., and that teaches, to become a wine teacher who occasionally writes and does a bit of judging. So, but her favorite category to judge, drink, and talk about is bubbles of all kinds. And she's the longest standing judge for the Amarim, I hope I'm saying that right, Cap Classique Challenge, and never without a bottle of something bubbly in her fridge. I think it's something that we all have in common with her. And she's just going to take us through the steps that puts the bubbles inside our favorite Cap Classique and other bubbles all over the world, and all the scandal and politics that this competitive world engenders. So Cathy has asked if you would like to ask questions as we go along. She would like it to be an interactive experience. So if you just, for those who don't know how to do a chat, either you can send me a WhatsApp via the IWC line and I can put it in the chat, or if you just wave your mouse down to the bottom, you can see chat, and just click on there and just put a question in the chat and click return, and it will send. And Cathy will just answer questions as we go along. So nothing further for me to say. That I hope you've got your bottle of bubbly on hand. I do. I have mine here. And as we celebrate the end of prohibition, and hopefully at the end we can toast to our future health and happiness and getting together. Hope maybe in September. Let's hope so. Well, thank you, Cathy, for being with us today. Over to you. I will just spotlight you.
So I'll unmute myself, so hopefully you can hear. Hi, everybody. I'm feeling a bit nervous now that she says I'm a Zoom expert, because now I'm going to have to work out how to share my screen. So hold on and just bear with me 2 seconds while I just figure that bit out. And hopefully that will work. Has that worked? Can you all see my screen? Yeah, we all happy and everything? Awesome. And let me just find the chat bit as well, because I want to see what you're all saying. So yeah, please, if you do have any questions as we go through this, please do chat to me, because otherwise it's quite lonely and I sort of sit here talking away, and it will be much more fun. So if you've got any comments or anything to say, or just, you know, tell us what you're drinking, tasting, sorry, not drinking, but yeah, obviously tasting, then please do, because it will be a lot more fun for all of us. So first of all, thank you very much for having me here to speak to you. This is a nice thing to do on a very lovely sunny day, thankfully. It's been very interesting hearing about all the things that you do as well. So I've got a couple of introductory slides, and then I'm going to crack straight on with the fizz. So we'll go on to those slides first of all. Let me see, is it going to go that way? There we are first. So just a little bit more filling in of what Victoria was saying. So I teach the internationally recognised Wine and Spirit Education Trust courses. So these were set up in the UK just over 50 years ago. And the idea was that they were just going to teach people in the hospitality industry. And then they expanded that a little bit more, and then they started teaching anybody else that was interested. This is all in the UK. And then gradually they've expanded, and they're now the largest global education provider of wine and spirits courses in the world. So I don't know how detailed you can actually see on the slide here, but these are all the countries that are currently offering WSET courses. So I know that you've got a very international membership here. So maybe these are countries that you are from, or just anyway, just that's where we actually operate internationally. So the courses are available in 19 different languages. They're in more than 75 countries around the world. In the last 12 months alone, even in COVID times, we still managed to put over 120,000 people worldwide through these courses. So they're pretty big and they're very important. So we teach a lot of people who need it for their jobs, particularly here in South Africa. So people who work on wine farms, we've educated lots and lots of those, and lots of people in hospitality. So people who are sommeliers or want to go and work on the cruise ships or whatever it might be, lots of people like that. But we also do a lot of people who just like wine, really, which is my favorite kind of people to teach. People who want to actually, spend their hard-earned cash to come and learn more about something that they love. So that's always fun. So whether you are a professional drinker or a leisure drinker, then we've got wine courses for all different levels for you all. So that's WSET. Some of you might have heard of something called the Cape Wine Academy, which is based here in South Africa. So the Cape Wine Academy was actually based on WSET. So they're about 10 years younger, and they're very much South African focused. They do great stuff, very much South African focused, but what we teach is internationally recognized. So it might be of more interest to you all as well. Anyway, so just looking at us, so I actually am the International Wine Education Centre. This is my business, this is what I run. It's a franchise effectively, a WSET, so I'm able to offer wine courses throughout South Africa. I've also taught in Namibia, in Mauritius, in the Seychelles and Dubai as well. So fairly international places that I've been to go and teach. This is just some pictures from some of the courses that we do. But one thing I did want to mention, because I know that all your members are very strong, sort of had a very strong charity focus in everything that you do, which is awesome. So I just wanted to tell you about some of the charity work that we're involved with, because it's a different angle, and it's something that I think would be interesting, because it's very much an empowerment thing that we're doing as well. So we're very involved in an organisation in Stellenbosch called the Pinotage Youth Development Academy. And this takes young people who've got matric, but who for various reasons have not been able to go on and study any further, go on to college or university. And it's nearly always that they can't go on and study because of money. But for a lot of them, particularly a lot of the girls that end up in the PYDA, is because they had children and they weren't able to actually juggle full-time university with this baby, which really, it cuts their life off at 18. There's nothing that they can do. They can't get back to get any further qualifications and create a good opportunity for themselves. So through some funding from WSET themselves and another IWC, actually not you guys, but an organisation called the International Wine Challenge, we get funding every year to put 50 of these students through their WSET level 2 qualification. And that gives them the opportunity to get jobs, not just here in South Africa, but to go and get themselves a career, not just a job, not just a paying the rent thing, but actually develop a career working on cruise ships, working in Dubai and hotels, working on private yachts in the Caribbean and all that kind of stuff. So opening up opportunities that these kids from Stellenbosch, from townships, would never ever have thought were available to them. And WSET is actually able to unlock that and give them chances to change their lives. It gives me goosebumps to talk about this, to be honest. And I'm sure you all know that kind of feeling. It's a really, really good organisation to make these kids work ready, able to take up some opportunities, and it's a real privilege for me that I get to teach these courses and to tell them them more, expand their horizons and give them opportunities. So that's just some of the pictures there from some of the guys from the PYDA with their certificates and their things that we did last year. And we're about to start on this year's courses for them, which are going to start on Tuesday, actually. So there we go, moving on to that. Okay, so that was me, and that was WSET, so a little bit of background. And now we're going to talk about bubbles. I don't know how many of you have got some bubbles there open and ready. Please feel free to sip as we chat. Excellent, I can see that Christine has, so that's awesome. And Anna Marie, is it? I'm trying to remember. So some of you have, that's fantastic. If you want to tell me what you're drinking as we go along, that's always very interesting. I also don't quite know how much you will know about bubbles, apart from the fact that they are the best use of a wine grape ever. So I'm going to kind of treat this that you have tiny bit of knowledge maybe, but if you think that I am over teaching, then please feel free to say so. And if I'm under teaching and you think I'm glossing over stuff, then just interrupt me and I'll stop and we'll go back, and then we'll end up with a little bit more information at the end of the day. So let's go straight on there. Right, so when we're talking about bubbles, there's obviously lots and lots of different types of bubbles. So ones I'm not going to talk about today are what we call carbonated bubbles. So if anybody has a soda stream machine at home, then you can actually make your own bubbles. And I've done it before now. If you get a nice bottle of Sauvignon Blanc or Chenin Blanc, put it in your soda stream machine, go and there you are, you've got bubbles. Now, I'm not going to talk about those kind of bubbles today because those are very easy, and I've just told you how to do it. So if you've got anything from people like JC LaRue, perhaps, or maybe some of the less expensive bubbles that you can get on the market, which are great to drink if you know, sort of midweek kind of fizz. I'm not going to talk about those carbonated bubbles. What I'm going to talk about today is bubbles that have been through a second fermentation. All right, so I don't want to teach you all to suck eggs, but just in case you don't know how to make alcohol, and just in case we do get locked down again, because you never know, it might be, coming on the cards. If you want to make your own alcohol, this is the equation of how you do it. All right, so here it is. Sugar plus yeast equals alcohol and carbon dioxide. So this is where you get your pineapples from. If you can get some pineapples, you've got some yeast, you put the two together, you can technically make alcohol. It may or may not be drinkable, I'm just saying, but that's actually how you can do it. So sugar plus yeast equals alcohol and carbon dioxide. And that's what actually makes all wine or beer or all kinds of anything that you have that's alcoholic. That's the actual sort of idea behind it. So what I'm going to talk about this morning is the kinds of wines that go through that process twice. So there are two fermentations involved here. So everything that we're talking about means that we make the first wine, we make it into still wine, and then we have a second fermentation, and the carbon dioxide that's produced during that fermentation, we're going to trap it inside the wine, and that's how we're going to make it bubbly. Okay, so I'm going to start off talking about how we make the base wine in the first place. So all my pictures here, as you can see from the logo on the side of the presentation, all my pictures come from Peter Ferreira from Graham Beck, who is the most passionate, bubbly person I know. I'm pretty good, nowhere near in Peter's league. So I've got fantastic photos of every stage of the bubbly process from him. So I'm just going to tell you about that there. So when you're starting off and you're making bubbles, the first things that you need to basically do is that you need to have very gentle pressing. I don't know if you know the grapes that you use to make traditional bubbles and champagne. Does anybody know what grapes you would use for that? Possibly, maybe. If you do, type it in there and we'll see. I don't know if everyone's typing very slowly or not. Okay, so I'll tell you what they are if you don't know. So we make them actually from a combination of, oh, there we are. Thank you, Tori. Very good. That was the direct message. So you might want to go back to everybody. There we go, the champagne grapes. So we're going to make them from Chardonnay and then two black grapes called Pinot Noir and Meunier. Now, when we're making fizz, we generally don't want to actually have any colour, and we don't want to have any tannins in that wine. Tannins are what your mouth feel very, very sort of dry and gummy. So we don't want those in there. So it's very important that we press very gently. So the pictures that you've got here that you can see on your screen, this is whole bunch pressing. So rather than taking the grapes off the stem, you always, when you're making proper MCC and champagne, you use whole bunches, because then you can press them more gently, because the actual stems will act as drainage tracks through the mass of the grapes that you squashed, so your juice can flow out much easier. So whole bunches is a very important thing. So this is actually the whole bunch pressing going on. But this is the interesting slide, if you can have a look at this. This is what shows you the difference between ones that are pressed very, very hard and ones that are pressed lightly. So you can see the glass on the left-hand side. That's been very, very gently pressed. So they haven't got any colour from the skins. They haven't got any what we call phenolics or tannins or anything that's bitter or nasty that we don't want to get in our fizz anyway. That hasn't come out in the glass on the left, whereas you can see the glass on the right is a much deeper colour. So we've got more of those phenolics coming out, and now there's going to be a little bit more risk that we're going to have perhaps some maybe some bitterness coming in there. And look at this, the bunches of grapes. You can see how juicy those ones are, how gently they've been pressed and how juicy they are compared to the ones where we've squeezed the bejesus out of those ones at the bottom. Okay, so this is why it's very important to get your whole bunch pressing in there, and you can see the quality of the juice and then the difference that you've got in the grapes at the end there. Yarati, you drinking that demi-sec from Graham Beck? Lovely. Okay, well, everything that you are drinking, okay, this is what happened to it. So you can actually relate completely to it there. So that's fantastic. Okay, so there we are. So you can see that the colour of the juice is coming through there, and how important it is that you get it at the end. So when you've got your juice come through, then you're going to have your fermentation and you're going to make it into wine. So you're adding in your yeast. Normally this takes place in a huge big stainless steel tank. So we add the yeast to the sugary grape juice and we produce alcohol and carbon dioxide. And in this first fermentation, we don't actually care what the CO2 does. It can disappear off as far as we're concerned. We're not interested in that CO2. All we want is to make a nice, clean, fresh base wine. Now, once we've got that base wine, we then need to make up the blend so that we can actually have our second fermentation. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm looking at the bubbles that I think everyone's talking about here. So the Steenberg, the Robertson, the Graham Beck, all of those bubbles that you're talking about, they're all non-vintage. Yeah. So if you look at the bottle, I've got one here that I'm going to wave about. I'm not drinking this one because I'm going to wave it about a bit. But this is Pierre Jourdain from Haute Cabrières. And if you look on it, you'll see that there's nowhere is there a vintage on the label. Nowhere does it say a year anywhere on the label. Yeah. So this is a non-vintage sparkling wine. Now, the thing about a non-vintage is that in any other style of wine, non-vintage normally means perhaps that it's not the poshest wine, it's not the top level of wine, it's more like to be an entry-level wine and maybe isn't going to taste quite so good. However, when it comes to bubbles, non-vintage is actually almost the very best kind, because so many people put so much branding, marketing spend behind their bubbles and their brands. It becomes very important that they actually always taste the same. If you ask any marketing person, they will tell you that the budgets for champagne are the highest budgets per cost of product than almost anything else. So a lot of money gets spent on that brand, which means that you actually have to make sure that it does taste the same from one year to the next. I don't know if anybody's got their favorite brand of champagne. Me, I'm a Bolly Dolly. I love Bollinger. I'm well up for that. And if I spend 800 rand on a bottle of Bollinger and it doesn't taste like the last time I bought a bottle of Bollinger, frankly, I'm going to be really upset. So it's very important that your wine tastes the same all the time. Now, how that's achieved, going back to my picture here, is by blending. And you do it by blending lots and lots of different patches of grapes. So you keep them all separate as they're going through the winery. So you have all these different areas where you get your grapes from. You've got different picking times, so that sometimes the acid is higher or it can be lower and everywhere else. So you have all these different separate parcels of wines that you've made, and then you bring them all together on a table like you can see in the picture here, and that's where you're actually going to have to go through and decide what's going to go into your wine this year. And your overriding consideration has to be, how can I make it taste like last year's? Yeah. I'm seeing people are talking about all these different wines on there. People love a particular brand of bubbly. They love a particular wine. So it becomes very important that you always have that one that tastes the same and you never get disappointed. So this is how it's done. You get 50, 60 different bottles, however many it might be, lined up on a counter in front of you. You get a little measuring bottle so you know how much you're taking from each wine, and then you taste. And everything that's done is now done by taste. So Peter Ferreira has been at Graham Beck now for more than 30 years. And they are paying for all those 30 years all the time. It's not necessarily what he does on a one-year basis, it's what he did in the last 30 years that he can remember, and he can bring all that knowledge and all that experience to bear when he's actually making up the blend this year. Okay, so that's the blending, is that going on there? And then this might be what you end up with, how you're going to actually end up making your final wines this year. So the Chardonnays, this will be the different parcels. You can see the numbers on there. That will refer to the different batches of Chardonnay that they've got. So that's the Chardonnays that they're going to blend together. This in the middle is a reserve wine. I'll come back to that just now. And then if you're making pinks, these will be the pink versions that they're going to put together to make a pink champagne. And then this is the reserve Pinot Noir as well. So these ones that are different colour, these are ones from previous years. So every year, people are going to keep a portion of their wine back. This happens in Champagne, it happens in MCC, it happens everywhere. People will keep a portion of their wine back, and they'll keep it either in a barrel, or maybe they'll keep it in a big tank. And what that will do will mean that they can then use it to adjust the wine from one year to the next. So it's like cooking and adding in some seasoning. Yeah, so just adding in a little bit of something from previous years, so that every year the wine that you make is going to end up tasting the same. Now, Graham Beck, because they're very high quality and they like to make sure that they are going to present a superior product, they actually keep all their wines, their reserve wines, in oak barrels. And what that gives you is it actually gives you a little bit more complexity, because now we've got an extra layer of flavour coming into that wine. So we've got all the different batches that we have from all those different vineyards. We've got all those different picking times. So we've got different levels of acidity and flavour. And now we've got another layer of complexity because we're putting in these oak aged bits and pieces as well. So just becomes really interesting and really quite complicated. Right, so once we've actually decided what's going to go into our second fermentation, and that's all made up, we've got it all ready to go, the next thing has to be to start that second fermentation. Now, the second fermentation can take place in one of two vessels, right? It can either take place inside the actual bottle that's here on the table in front of you, okay? Or it can take place in a big tank. And if anyone wants to talk about Prosecco later on, then we'll talk about Prosecco and we'll talk about tanks in a bit. But for now, we're going to talk about bottled wines instead. Therese, I see your questions. Why is champagne better than those with allergies versus wine? It's because, it's a very simple explanation actually, you can't add so much sulfur. Okay, you can't add very much sulfur into a champagne because during the second fermentation process, if there is too much sulfur in there, you're actually not going to get the yeast carrying on and doing its fermentation process. So because you can't add so much sulfur, it's the sulfur that generally causes allergies at the end of the day. So fizz generally has very low sulfur levels, and if that's what gives you headaches or what makes you sneeze or whatever, then bubbles is a very good option. So hopefully that's answered your question. If not, ask it again and we'll come back to it. Okay, so we've got our blends already made up. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start that second fermentation. So we've made up our blend. We're going to put it into our bottle, right? So going into our special strong bottles with this very, very big punt at the bottom, going into these special strong bottles. We put our wine in here, and then we also add some extra sugar and some extra yeast. Okay, so a little bit extra sugar and a little bit extra yeast is going to go in here. And then what we do, rather than putting on the whole sort of cork and the muesli and all that kind of thing, look at the second picture, we put on a beer cap. Okay, so a beer cap actually goes on top of this bubbles. All right, and then it goes and it lies down somewhere. Now then, if we've added sugar and we've added yeast, those two are going to get together in this bottle. They're going to have themselves a little party. And what they're going to do is they're going to create some extra alcohol, only about 1 or 2% alcohol. But most importantly, they're going to create bubbles. And because we've got that beer cap on the end here, those bubbles cannot now escape. So what happens to them is that they have to stay trapped inside this bottle of wine. They dissolve into the wine and the wine becomes bubbly. Okay, so that's literally how we get the bubbles into the bottle. It's a second fermentation that takes place inside the bottle that we have here on the table in front of you. So that could be the end of my presentation, except that there's another couple of steps to go. Because when you have sugar and yeast together and the yeast starts eating up all the sugar and turning it into alcohol and carbon dioxide, when the yeast has got nothing else to eat, it's going to die. And it's going to fall to the bottom of the tank or the bottle, and it's going to just lie there looking really quite messy. In fact, we've got a picture of it. This is what it's going to look like inside your bottle. So you can see all that sort of slightly gunky stuff on the inside there, yeah? That's the dead lees, the dead yeast cells, okay? We call them the lees. So that yeast is now, it's done its job, thank you very much. It's eaten the sugar, it's created the bubbles, and now it's died and it's fallen to the bottom, and we call that lees. Now, clearly, none of you are going to be very happy if your bottle of bubbles looks like that. It's not going to look very nice at all. So the next steps that we're looking at are the steps to actually get that gunk, that dead yeast cell gunk. We need to remove that from the bottle. But before we do that, we have to actually let it sit in there so that we get some extra flavour from there. So you see here that the title here is the lees contact period for yeast autolysis between 9 and 12 months. So during that 9 or 12 months, or even longer than that, a lot of people do it longer than that, what happens is that the acids involved in the wine start to break down those dead yeast cells, okay? So they're breaking down the dead yeast cells, and they are taking some of that yeasty flavour and dissolving it and adding it into the wine. Okay, so this is called yeast autolysis. So breaking down that yeast, and what we get is these things that we always talk about when we have champagne and MCC. We're going to get bready, biscuity, doughy, salty, brioche, all those kinds of flavors that we talk about when we taste champagne and MCC. Those come from that gunky stuff that you can see on that picture. Okay, there's lots of things in wine that don't look as nice while they're being made, but they'd end up tasting quite nice at the end of the day. So this is a very important process, this yeast autolysis, or lees aging time, or lees contact time. And you'll often find that people will refer to that on the back of the bottle. They'll tell you how long it's been in the lees, particularly if you've got prestige cuvées, if you've got something from South Africa like Silverthorn, or Lalude, or I saw somebody had Pongrats earlier, so it might not be Pongrats, but it might be Desiderius, which is the prestige Pongrats, if you like. So they'll often tell you how long they've been on the lees, and the longer it's on the lees, the more of those yeasty, brioche, toasty kinds of flavours we're going to get into the wine. Okay. So that's Lee's contact. Now, it also adds extra sort of flavors and it helps the wine to age and mature. And I've got another slide for you here. This is real top level stuff. I have to say, I didn't actually know any of this until Peter did a presentation that involved this, and I shamelessly stole his slide now. So this is really just something very, very geeky, but I find it absolutely fascinating. This is why some champagnes can last for a really, really long time, and some should be drunk really quite earlier. And it's a lot to do with the actual makeup of the grapes that have been used to make those wines. Okay, so there are three main grape varieties. So Chardonnay, so CHY, you can see there, Pinot Noir, which is the one in the middle, PNR, and then one that used to be called Pinot Meunier. It's now just called Meunier, but that's the one at the beginning in the PMR. So when you guys drink champagnes or you drink MCC, the ones that are going to be ready to drink now, and most of the non-vintage ones, they are going to have a higher proportion of these two grape varieties, a higher proportion of Meunier and a higher proportion of Pinot Noir. Because if you can see on their sort of maturation curve, they reach their peak much sooner. So Pinot Meunier, that becomes ready to drink at just over 2 years old. Pinot Noir is a little bit longer lasting. That reaches its peak at about 5 years. Chardonnay is the slowest starter, has a really, really slow growing and maturation curve. So it only actually becomes great to drink about 8 years after the wine has first been made. Okay, so you will find that if you're going to analyze or if you want to look up the ones that are ready to drink now, the non-vintages, they're going to have high proportions of Meunier and Pinot Noir in, whereas Blanc de Blancs, so Blanc de Blanc, white from white grapes, that's going to actually give you a fizz that's going to have the longest maturation time and is going to be good to keep for the longest time altogether. So Julia Haldane, how do we spell Mert? That is absolutely spot on. You don't need me to spell that at all. Correct. So 10 out of 10 for Julia. You get to take a glass of fizz. Well done. So that's Meunier there. That's how you spell it. So I just think that's actually quite an interesting chart, really. If you want to have a fizz that you're going to lay down and keep for any length of time, then Chardonnay, or one with a high proportion of Chardonnay, is going to be the best one for you, and that's going to actually last the longest time then. Okay, what's the oldest champagne you can drink? Oh, well, it depends how much money you've got, Amanda, quite frankly. I will tell you the facts I know from Dom Perignon, because I was very lucky to get taken on an extremely larny trip with Dom Perignon a few years ago. So Dom Perignon, which is the flagship brand of Moet et Chandon, they have got wines that are still on the lees, on those dead yeast cells. They've got bottles going back to 1921. Okay, they only have 7 bottles of those, but they have ones going back to 1921, and they have a bottle from every single vintage ever since there. Now, they do current releases, what they call their plenitude program, and so they will release Dom Perignons at about 14 years old, which is P2, and then at about 25 years old, which is their P3. I didn't pay for any of those, but I'm very thankful I got to drink them. The Plenitude 2, so the 14-year-old, costs somewhere in the region of about 5,500 rand per bottle. They don't tell you the price of the Plenitude 3 on the basis that if you have to ask the price, you can't afford it. So I don't know how much it costs, but you can maybe do the maths from there. So that's the oldest ones I've ever drunk. And they go back a very long time. Okay, so somebody was asking about 20-year-old bottle of Laurent Perrier, will it be awful? I don't know, Sue. A lot depends where you've kept it, okay? If you've kept it in the kitchen and in one of those Easy Life kitchen slots that are right next door to the cooker, I think it will be shot, to be honest. So I'm not sure it's actually going to be any good. If, on the other hand, you've kept it and it's been nice and cool, and particularly if you've maybe kept it upright, then it might well be very nice indeed. I don't really know. The chances are very high that the bubbles might have faded a little bit, so it won't be very bubbly. You've kept it upright, brilliant, well done. Most people don't do that. I'll talk about that just now as well. But if you've kept it upright and if you've kept it cool, then I would just open it and have a lovely time. If it's for a special occasion, I would get a second bottle in just in case it's not so good. But you could have a real winner there. It might be fantastic. So enjoy that one there. Okay. Have we done all the questions that want at the moment? Yeast autolyzation. Yes, you can have extra yeasty flavors on other things. It will work on still wine. It will work on sparkling wine as well. So you can have either of those on there. Okay, right. This is why, Sue, this is why you would know that we store bubbly standing upright and not actually lying down. So that's a very good correct point there. Okay, anyway, let me get back to my presentation, and then I'll come back to some questions in a second now as well. So once we've got that bubbly in there, and we've got all that stuff in there, we need to get all that gunk out. Otherwise, we're not actually going to be able to sell this wine. So this process is called riddling. Okay, so what happens? Our bottle's been lying down like this. All the dead yeast cells are now lying there on the bottom, okay? And so we take this bottle and we either slot it into a big sort of V-shaped board. You can see there on the right-hand side. This is called a pupitre. So you can slot it into there, or you can do this on a much bigger scale, which I'll talk about just now. And then every day, sometimes twice a day, somebody comes around and they give it a quarter turn, little shake, and a tilt, okay? Quarter turn, little shake, and a tilt. Quarter turn, little shake, and a tilt. Da-dum, 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 da-dum. So that very slowly and very gradually, all the gunky dead yeast cells that have been lying on the bottom, and all together, they get shifted very, very slowly and without leaving any behind until the bottle is vertical like this, which is called à point, and all the dead yeast cells are now down here at the bottom. Okay, so now at least they're near the exit, so we've got a fighting chance of getting them out now, haven't we? So it's called riddling or remuage. You can do either way, French or English, whichever you want. So you end up with your yeast cells down in the neck of the bottle, and the bottle is now upside down like this. Okay, so you can either do it on these things here, or you can do it on a gyro pallet, which does exactly the same thing, just as an entire pallet of wine at the same time. Okay, so moving on then to what we do next. The next thing that happens is that we are going to dip the neck here into an ice bath. Okay, so we're dipping it into an ice bath. It can be lots of things. It could be ice, it could be dry ice, it could be brine, it could be lots of things. But what we're going to do is we're going to freeze that block of ice that contains now all the dead yeast cells. We're going to freeze that into a solid ice block. Okay, so once that's frozen into a solid ice block, we flip it back up this way. I don't know if you can see in there that it is frozen on that picture there with the crown cap. I'm not quite sure if you can see it. It's a little bit darker at the front. It's not a great picture. Okay, so we flip it back upright like this, and then we put it through a machine that flips off the beer cap. The pressure that's now built up from the bubbles inside this bottle, there is more pressure now inside this bottle than there is in the tire of a bus, okay? Up to 6 bars of pressure going on in here. And that pressure is going to basically go like that, and it's going to fire out this frozen lump of dead yeast cells and ice, and it's going to fire that out all over the place. You can just see that sort of about ready to happen as it goes down the line there. So it's obviously done on a machine here, but you can do it by hand as well. This is what it looks like. So you can see all the sort of the dead yeast cells there on the underside of the cap. Okay, if anyone's ever used, I think we all use powdered yeast these days if we're going to be making banana bread in lockdown. But if anybody remembers, my mum used to have proper fresh yeast that she used to buy. It came like a little fawn coloured block. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but that's literally the same stuff, okay, that you used to make bread. That's what it looks like there. So that's all the dead yeast cells that you've got underneath. And this here that you can see in Peter's hands, this is a disgorging tool. Okay, so it's like just a normal bottle opener that you'd sort of open a bottle of beer with, but it's slightly longer so that your fingers don't get broken off by the pressure of this block coming out. Okay, so now we've got our bottle of wine. We've got rid of all the dead yeast cells. It's nice and clear. The bubbles are all still in there. So all that we need to do now is just slightly top it up a little bit, probably with a little bit of sugar, to be honest. And then we put the cork inside. We've put the muesli or the cage on top, and then it goes and it lies down a little bit longer, just to get its acting gear, just to get over its teenage tantrums, and then we can send it to market and we can use it to drink and things. Okay, so that's basically how we make fizz and how we get a second fermentation. So I'm seeing now the questions are coming in, which is awesome. So I'm just going to scroll back and answer a couple here. Where are we going with? So we had that there. Someone was asking a demisec. Here we go, Victoria. Okay, so here we are. When we're adding then at the end, so we've got rid of that block of ice. We've got rid of our horrible dead yeast cells that we don't need anymore in now. We are now no longer having 750 mils in this bottle, so we need to top it up. And in addition, we actually need to possibly add in some sugar in there as well. This was absolutely bone dry before we put it in the bottle, because if there had been any sugar in that wine anyway, then the yeast would have gone on and eaten it, and then we would have had explosions. So it had to be absolutely bone dry. So the sugar gets added afterwards, and this is how much sugar you can actually add into your wine to make the different styles that we're talking about. So if we're going to make a Brut nature, then we probably don't add any sugar into our wine at all. Okay, we're just going to top it up with wine, and then that's the end of it. An extra Brut is going to be up to 6 grams of residual sugar. You probably won't taste that because there's so much acid in the wine. It's not actually going to give you a very sweet taste at all. Most of the wines that we drink are going to be Brut, so it will literally just say Brut, as you can see there, and that's up to 12 grams of sugar. So that's what a lot of people are going to be drinking. Extra Brut, you often see this on Prosecco, and I see we've got a question about Prosecco. I'll come to that just now. So that's between 12 and 17% grams of sugar per litre. Dry or sec is between 17 and 32, and then demisec is between 32 and 50 grams of sugar. So if you want to make a demisec style, you're going to have to add in that much extra sugar to offset the acid. Now, that seems an awful lot of sugar. It isn't an awful lot of sugar. If any of you have ever drunk a dessert wine, a Noble Late Harvest, that's about 150 grams of sugar. Okay, so if you think about that and then in relation to your demisec just means that there's a little bit of a sweeter edge in there, but it doesn't mean by any means that it's like drinking something very, very sweet at all. And then you've got Doux, which is 50 grams and upwards on there. Okay, so that's how we're going to get the sugar in there. What about magnums? Great question by iPad. Hi, iPad. Don't know who that is, but very good question there. So magnums, you can do this process with as well. So anything that's up to a magnum, you will just have it the same way. So you'll have your fermentation in the bottle, it will happen, and then you will riddle your magnums, and then it will come out at the end of the day. Anything bigger than a magnum, you've actually had to make it up from smaller bottles, because from a Jeroboam and upwards, there's too much pressure in there for the glass to be able to contain it. So they can't actually have the second fermentation in Jeroboams or Nebuchadnezzars or Rehoboams or any of those big format bottles. They've actually been made by fermenting in smaller formats and then decanting into those bigger bottles and then bottling it from there. Okay, it's too risky to go through that process of second fermentation, so they don't do that. Are magnums better than bottles? Absolutely. I don't know who it was who said a magnum is the perfect size for 2 people if only one of them's drinking. And I'm well up for that, quite frankly. That sounds perfect to me. But magnums are very good, not just because you obviously get more volume, but magnums will actually age longer. If you look at a magnum and the size of the magnum neck compared to the size of a bottleneck, there is actually hardly any difference. Okay, they are virtually the same size, which means that there is less possibility of any oxygen getting inside and aging the wine any time of day, and there's also going to be less transference of the phenolics from the cork into the wine itself as well. So the upshot will be that your magnum will age much slower and will be nicer for a lot longer time. if I had my way, I would only ever buy Magnums, but my bank manager and my husband don't agree with me on that one. So unfortunately, I have to buy bottles like normal people as well. Okay, right. So Julia, absolutely, you are completely correct. This process that we've talked about, this is how Carver is made as well. So Cordonnier and Fresnay, the big powerhouses of Carver production. Lots and lots of changes going on in Carver right now. But if you go to a tour there, you'll see that done there as well. If you go to JC LaRue, you can actually get a really good tour at JC LaRue, and they will show you all these things too. Okay, right, Molly's iPhone, I'm presuming this is Molly who's asking the question here. Hi, Molly, what's the difference between Champers and Prosecco? Well, it's still a second fermentation. So you have your first fermentation, you make wine, and then you put it into your fermentation vessel. However, the process I've been talking about treats the bottle as your second fermentation vessel. When you're making Prosecco, your second fermentation vessel is an enormous tank, okay? A huge, big tank, basically. And then exactly the same process happens. It's a closed tank, so you add in your sugar, you add in your yeast in there. It has a second fermentation in the tank, and then from that tank, you then decant it and you put it into bottles. So if you ever have side by side a Prosecco and an MCC or a champagne, you'll notice that the bubbles in Prosecco are a little bit softer. They're a little bit more gentle. They're not quite as frothy in the mouth as a champagne. And that's because it's had to go through some pipes to get into the bottle before you actually get to drink it. Okay. Is there no danger of the bottle bursting at any stage? Yes, there's a lot of danger of the bottles bursting. It's not so dangerous for bottles. It's not so dangerous really for magnums, but I can tell you now that Haute Cabrières, so Achim von Arnim at Haute Cabrières in Franschhoek, when they wanted to make some Jeroboams for the millennium, they had to actually build a separate concrete wall in the cellar to put those Jeroboams behind, and the only person who was allowed to look after them was Achim, because he signed a waiver and he wasn't going to, sue anybody or sue himself if anything happened and those things exploded. So it is a problem. It does happen. You've got to be very careful. And the most important thing is that you've got to make sure that your wine that goes into the bottle is absolutely bone dry, because if there's any extra sugar, that yeast is going to chow it. And as soon as it starts chowing the extra sugar, it's going to create extra bubbles and extra pressure. So it's very important when you go for that bottling that you make sure that what you put in there is dry and it's not going to have anything extra happening. Do they send the tops to the bakers for use of the yeast? No, they don't. It's a great question, actually. They don't, but they could do. That yeast is now dead, unfortunately. So it's not really going to be reactivated. They do use fermenting wine for other things. So I suppose some yeast content, if any of you've had, okay, can't pronounce this, I'm really sorry, Afrikaans speakers, but have you ever had mosboliki bread? Is that right? Yeah, I'm really sorry if that's like horrendously bad Afrikaans. But mosboliki bread, which is, I always like to translate it as, excuse my French, little moose bollocks, which I know is not the correct translation for that bread. But anyway, that's always have it in my mind. But that's made with fermenting wine yeast, so you can use it from that point of view as well. Okay, so there we go. There. You did that tour at JC Louis. It's interesting, huh? I think it's probably the best tour. If you go to Graham Beck, they'll talk to you about things, but you don't really see stuff. And the nice thing about that JC Louis tour is that you've got those big glass windows, and so you can actually look through and see what's going on. So, okay, we seem to have come to the end of some questions. So, and I hope you've all been happily sipping so far. I haven't, so it's time for me to join you. And I thought you just might be interested. I've actually got some different wine glasses here to show you. So I don't know if I can just tilt my screen down a little bit. There we go. So I have some different wine glasses to show you. I have my bottle of fizz as well. I'm actually on pink fizz this morning, which I opened earlier, so I didn't make an idiot of myself. So there we go. So I've just got a little array of some glasses just to sort of talk you through a few options. So I think this is probably the one that we're most familiar with, this flute. You can see I've been to the Farnshire Fizz Festival, so this is what's engraved on the side of my flute. So this one here is the one that we traditionally are using nowadays for sparkling wine. This is a good glass because it's got a very narrow surface area, which creates a high level of surface tension, which means it's hard for the bubbles to break that surface tension, so they stay inside the glass. So if you want to keep your wine bubbly, the narrower the glass you can find, the better it will be.
Cathy,
However,
can you just stop your screen share, and then we can see just see you?
Okay, let me do that.
That would be great. Thanks.
Stop the share. There we go. Right. Okay.
Perfect.
Fine. So I'll put down so you can see everything dodgy on the floor, which you don't want to look at. Okay, so this is a flute then. So this is what you would normally use if you want to keep your bubbles in the glass. But there is quite a lot of movement nowadays to say, do we want the bubbles or do we want the flavour? Particularly for wines that are a little bit older and a little bit more complex. So this is now becoming the trendy shape. This actually is from Paul Roger, I think. Yeah, this is a Paul Roger glass. So this is what they call the sort of the tulip shape. This is the one that Graham Beck like to serve their wines in. And the idea of this is that it's still narrow at the bottom, so it encourages the beads and the bubbles to get going, but then it opens out a little bit to allow the aromas to cluster, and then it comes in again at the top so that those aromas can then get funneled into your nose. Okay, so that's the Graham Beck one that they like. This is the Paul Roger one. Me, I like the Graham Beck because it's bigger, so that obviously is a good idea as well. And then this is just another glass as well, also with a very narrow at the bottom. And you can't see this, but I'm just going to tell you something that's quite interesting to know. A lot of glasses that are made specifically for sparkling wine, they actually laser etch little ridges at the bottom of the glass, right at the bottom, so that when your bubbles hit those, they hit the ridges and they actually just become more excited and more bubbly, which is quite an interesting thing to know, really. I bought this one. I actually think this is a vase, but someone sent it to me with some bubbles, but I think it's a vase, so I'm not going to use that one there. I'm actually going to pour myself some into the Graham Beck glass instead. Should have had Graham Beck, but I didn't. So I'm drinking Jacques Prouvaire from Bon Courage this morning. It's their vintage pink. It's very nice. It's 2012, so it's 9 years old. So that's what I'm going to be drinking right now. So if you were waiting for me to drink, and I'm hoping you weren't, then cheers. This is your cue. You can now open up your bubbles and have a quick glass. Very nice indeed. Okay, let's have a look. We've got a few other things coming through on the chat here. For non-alcoholic wine, the sugar less than regular wine are the same. Okay, the problem with non-alcoholic, there's not a problem with non-alcoholic wine actually, but if you take out, alcohol and sugar are obviously related. So the more sugar you have, the more alcohol you're going to have at the end of the day. If you take that alcohol out, or if you take the sugar out, then what you're risking getting left with is something that isn't really very flavoursome. Okay, it's like if you look at a lot of low-fat yogurts, okay, fat carries flavour. If we have low-fat yogurts, you'll often find that they're compensated by putting in extra sugar to carry through that flavour instead. And this, unfortunately, is one of the problems with non-alcoholic wines. So you can take out the alcohol from wine, that's absolutely fine, that's not a problem. But then your wine risks being a little bit tasteless and not having much richness and much body, so they tend to compensate by putting sugar back into that wine. If you want non-alcoholic wine that I think are actually quite good, I would have a look at Van Leeuwen. They're Absolute Zero wine. They've got some that are bone dry that are very well worth it. So it's 0.005% alcohol, so it's tiny, and that's a de-alcoholized one that's quite good, that is quite dry. But I'm afraid that I think you're likely to find that most of the others are unfortunately going to have quite a lot of sugar in there to compensate for that lack of alcohol. Okay. Have I done the whole sword sabrage thing? Well, I have to tell you, I'm rubbish at sabrage. I'm really not very good at it at all. I've taught lots of people to do it, and I know the theory. For some reason, every time I do it, I just end up hacking the thing. So I'm not very good at it. But I have taught people. My son has been sabraging. I maybe shouldn't say this. My son has been sabraging since he was 6. So he's done quite well with it, but it's not something I can do very much. If you want to know, sabraging is basically where you run a sword or a kitchen knife up the seam of your bottle of fizz and you knock off the whole of the neck. The reason it works is because your fizz bottle is actually made in 3 components. Okay, there's this half, and then there's the top bit that gets glued on the top and fused onto the top. So if you hit at the most vulnerable part, which is the seam between the 2 halves, where that seam joins the neck, if you hit it there, then your whole top will fly off with the cork inside, is the idea. Okay, looks very spectacular. It's really cool to do at parties. My top recommendations would be A, watch a video. First of all, you can Google it and you can watch videos online. B, do it sober. I have seen accidents with this. Don't sabrage when you've had too much to drink. It's not funny. And then someone's got to take you to the hospital. So do it sober. And then the third most important tip that I don't think they always tell you, never sabrage from an ice bucket. Not ever. The most times I've seen sabrage go wrong is when there's a temperature differential between the bottom of the bottle and the wine at the top. That's when it explodes and goes all over the place. Okay, so only ever sabrage from a fridge. And have fun, enjoy it. It's quite a fun thing to do. Okay, what else have I got? Why were the really old champagne glasses so wide at the top? It was a style thing. So these were what they call the coupes, the ones like this, the ones that they said were modelled on Marie Antoinette's boobs. That's a lie. It's not true at all. But that was what it said, that it was modelled on her breasts. And I think that they just looked quite sophisticated at the time. They looked quite sort of, quite posh. You could tower them up. You've seen those towers in movies where you tower up your glasses and then you cascade down your champagne and things like that. Those have been pretty much now sort of said it's not great for bubbles and it's not great for flavour. So unless you want to do a tower for a wedding or something, I wouldn't really advise those very, very broad ones. They're not very good particularly. Okay. Oh, hi Vanessa. Yes, I know your son Stefan. Excellent. We're waiting to hear his results. We haven't got them just yet. We're just waiting to hear some results. So our fingers are crossed for those that are going to come through soon. The Lotus Rosé, yeah, I agree. I think that's actually very nice as well. Alcoholic Allure. Now, is this Allure? Is that the fizz from Graham Beck? I think it might be actually. I'm not quite sure. And then the same cost of de-alcoholized, and yeah, it is an extra process. So what actually happens, and the reason that we're seeing a lot of rise in non-alcoholic wines now, is A, that we're actually more interested in them because we're all a bit healthier and we're looking for, things that aren't going to be quite so bad for us. But we've now got some great technology called spinning cone technology. So what that means is that you put your wine with the alcohol into this container, and it spins it around so fast that the wine actually breaks up into the individual components. Okay, so it breaks up into the alcohol and the water and the flavor and the color components, and then all we have to do is just take the alcohol ones away and throw those away. Now, how this is different from any other way in the past is that we're actually able to catch all the different components, and that includes all the aromas and all the flavors properly, whereas in the past, when we used to take the alcohol out, we'd actually take the flavors out as well, so we end up with a very boring wine. So now with this new technology, we just take out the alcohol bit that we don't want, and we can put back in all the flavors and all the aromas. So our de-alcoholized sparkling wines now are far better quality than they used to be. So I hope that makes some sense. When the frozen yeast is allowed to escape, how do you stop the rest of the bubbly bursting out the bottle? Great question. Yeah, absolutely. It's really because this is frozen solid, but this bit is pretty darn cold as well. Okay. everything moves slower at cold temperatures. You move slower at cold temperatures, so do I, okay? And bubbles move slower at cold temperatures as well. So if everything is very cold, this is why we chill bubbles before we open them. If you don't believe me, open a room temperature bubbly and just see what happens, okay? It's going to explode all over the place. So everything is as cold as we can make it. That bit's frozen, but this bit is now down to about 4 or 5 degrees centigrade, so that when we get rid of that pellet of ice, the bubbles will mostly stay in there, and then we quickly put that cork back in, and then it will go from then on. Okay. Okay, do I like Silverthorn? I love Silverthorn. Who was asking about magnums? Here you are. This is hot from the horse's mouth here. Silverthorn are about to launch their first ever bubbles at the moment in Magnum. So if you want magnums of the Green Man, they are going to be making them available in the next month or so. Get yourself on the list. I'm at the head of the list, just saying, because, you know, I've been, you know, organized about this. But if you want some fantastic magnums of Silverthorn Chardonnay, really nicely aged, get yourself on the list now, because they're not going to hang around. Okay, so Silverthorn out in Robertson, very, very good. I love this one, actually. This is very nice, my favourite bubbles. I like Graham Beck very much indeed, and I like Lelude as well. In Franschhoek, also very nice bubbles. Okay. We should be very proud of our MCC. You're absolutely right, Annette. We make fantastic bubbles here. So I see I've got a question there. Just about some of the machinations going on in the world of bubbles. I don't know if anyone's interested about that, but you are an international club, so I assume you maybe are. But you might have seen recently that Vladimir Putin has now banned champagne from being labelled as champagne in Russia. So that was the headlines, and there was a big problem for all the champenoirs who weren't certain whether they actually wanted to go ahead and sell their bubbles in Russia. But it's such a big market, I think they decided it's going to be okay. So they are still allowed to call it champagne on the front label, but on the back label, they now have to call it sparkling wine. So Moet and Bollinger and Verve, they're all just sparkling wine on the back label now for Russia. Whereas Russian champagne, inverted commas, which is made in Russia, that's allowed to say champagne there and champagne there. So go figure, huh? It's obviously a big enough market that they decided they couldn't lose it. I mean, someone was also talking about Cava earlier on. I don't know if you know what's going on in Cava in Spain at the moment, but there's more political and intrigue going on in Cava as well. So Fresnay and Cordonnier have basically cornered the Cava market for the last 20, 30, X number of years. And then there's lots of other producers who are now saying, yeah, but I make better Cava than those guys. I make top premium Cava. I don't want my Cava associated with them. So what we've got happening in Spain right now, really interesting scenario, is that we've got several breakaway factions of Cava makers who are no longer calling their wine Cava. So we've got some very, very good producers over in Catalonia who are now calling their wine Corpinat, which is a strange word to me, but Corpinat, to differentiate it from Cava. We've got people in Rioja who are now saying, we don't have anything to do with Cava, we're going to call it our own thing, we're going to call it Espumosos de Calidad or something like that. I can see that someone's laughing at, I think, do you speak Spanish? I think you probably do, and you're laughing. Yes, I thought so. I'm really sorry, I don't speak Spanish. Anyway, and then we've got another faction as well called Cava de Paella as well. So there's lots and lots of intrigue going on in the world of Cava in Spain. So if you ever want to have a look at that, it's quite an interesting topic to know about as well. So yeah, have I gone on long enough? I could keep going for a long time, you know, so I can happily stop now and let you all drink and enjoy your bubbly lunches. I just wanted to go back quickly, if I can just quickly reshare my screen, which is, I don't know if I can do that, share screen, there we go. Just want to put this last slide up to let you all have a look at and see, because, yeah, there we go, not that one, there we go, there, thank you very much. Just to say that, thank you very much for having me. It's been great fun. Any excuse to open bubbles on a Thursday morning, I'm right there with you. So, you know, if you ever need this doing again, then give me a call. If any of you were interested in coming on any of my wine courses, or any of your family or any of your friends or anyone who you think might benefit from a WSET course, I'm very happy to offer you all a 10% discount. Please just use IWC member when you're booking, and you can find all the details of all the courses online at www.thewinecentre.co.za. So we would love to see some of you on our wine courses. You're never too old to learn anything different. You're never too young to start drinking great fizz. It doesn't matter if you're in the industry or not, please, it would be lovely to have you. So I'll leave that there, and I think Victoria is going to put it on the website somewhere as well, so you can have a look at that later. But in the meantime, from me on a happy Thursday lunchtime, cheers, thank you very much for having me, and I hope that's been interesting. Have a lovely rest of the day. There we go.
Cathy, on behalf of the club, I'd just like to say a very big thank you to you for a very fun and informative educational talk. I think we've all learned something today about bubbly that we didn't know before. Thank you very much. Having done quite a few Zooms, we've all got used to looking at the background of people's offices, and I have to say yours is the office that I would like to have, because you have the most interesting shelf behind you. I'd love to come and have to visit you in your office and poke around, see what's in those boxes behind you.
Enormous amounts of wine.
Enormous amounts of wine. Yes, that's what I was hoping you were going to say. So we've all really enjoyed your talk. We really appreciate you finding time for us. And it's been a great way to spend Thursday morning, and a little bit uplifting during these challenging times. And I think now when we do go out choosing bubbly and shopping, we'll have just that little bit more information to help us make a good choice. And we can air our knowledge with our friends when we're cracking open the bubbly, and look very knowledgeable, especially when we talk about the glasses and the new tulip shape. I shall go and get some of those, I think. So a very big thank you.
I always tell my students, the more you drink, the more you know.
Okay. Or you think you do, yes.
You can now officially call it drinking homework. So,
Exactly. I shall look upon this as research when I've been finishing off my bottle. So thank you for offering that discount to us. We'll try and make sure that information is also available. Perhaps we can put it on our Facebook page and so on, if anyone is interested in doing one of your fascinating courses. And yeah, so a big thank you. And I just want to remind you ladies, before you go this morning, there are some things happening next week. So don't forget to look in on the Art and Design Zoom, which is on interior design on Wednesday. So please join us for that. And I hope it's given you a cheerful start to your Thursday and a good beginning for a weekend. I think we've got Women's Day on Monday. So I hope you can all perhaps celebrate women with a glass of something bubbly on Monday. So once again, Cathy, thank you very much indeed for joining us today and giving us such a fun talk. Cheers.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.